Eco-anxiety is a label on something that's quite hard to specify and manifests itself in different ways, in different people, in different cultures. But it's a sense of the impact of humanity being destabilizing of civilization, if you like, and a kind of intuitive sense that what we're doing, whether it's pollution, whether it's what's happening to biodiversity, whether it's what's happening in the oceans, the build-up of plastics in the seas, and somehow all of that gets added up and reinforced by what people are experiencing in terms of changing extreme weather events. And so, whereas once these were things you sort of read about and moved on, I think now they're becoming much more present in people's lives. And of course, as always, you know, young people are much more attuned to the now and more focused on what's immediately in front of them than are older people. And so I think that general sort of sense of a planet in peril is really sort of powerful for them.
It's different and it's personal to everyone because it is a mental health disorder and there is not one set definition for a mental health disorder, but I kind of understand it and experience it as nervousness or stress kind of induced by thoughts, ideas or information related to the climate crisis. I have always been somewhat at some level aware of climate change, or at least humanity's impact on the planet. I mean, from a very young age, I remember watching David Attenborough interviews and listening to his warnings and not necessarily understanding it, but still kind of being aware that there was a problem. But I think it really began to concern me and be a real factor in my life. 12 or 13, that's when food really started to become the way in which I controlled my fears. So I would start off by just kind of checking in food packaging and kind of Googling some different products or ingredients that I kind of thought might be suspicious about where they came from, might be like unsustainable, such as like cocoa or palm oil and things like that. So I would start obsessing then over different food brands and products, and it would take forever for my mum to be able to shop with me because I would not let her shop by herself because I wouldn't trust her to get the right things, and I would just spend probably at 2 hours reading through everything, just making sure that I wasn't responsible for buying something that was unsustainable. Primary school and secondary school never really educated or offered any real information or relevant information of how the climate crisis would relate to me. It was always kind of the same message about the ice caps melting, and I never really understood how that would affect me. So the only real information I got was from short news clips that I'd hear on the radio or the 6 o'clock news or something like that, and those would always be very dramatic, very blunt, very kind of overwhelming news about natural disasters or extreme weather events or just so many different events that would really worry me, and it would just be short and sharp and it wouldn't really offer any solutions and it wouldn't say how we could stop it or how it was caused. And I guess that's really when everything started to confuse me. So at about age 14, yes, 14, I just refused to eat almost anything, and I think in one way it was, as many teenage girls and boys alike will say that they have at some point felt self-conscious about what they eat in terms of their body. It was very much also eco-anxiety fueled, and I just felt so guilty that no one else was, or very few people were changing their lifestyles. I thought I would have to counteract that by going to the extreme and almost eating nothing. So that's what I did. I just really wouldn't eat very much, and no one really noticed at first, but I think when they really started to notice that I was really kind of consumed by this issue was you could kind of see the quite dramatic weight loss, and I was incredibly stressed by food and by news clips that I would hear, or just informational articles that I would read, and I would just feel guilty, and my whole personality kind of reversed itself, because I used to be quite positive and not carefree in a way, but very optimistic, and I was still quite young, so I was just quite almost innocent in a way and oblivious, whereas I would start being more or less smiley, to be honest, because I'd always been described when I was younger as a very smiley child, and I would just stop being so positive because I was just so worried all the time about this. No one really understood it. I mean, they kind of understood what I was telling them. They got the gist of it, but they didn't understand why I was acting so irrationally. And they didn't well, my family and friends, they weren't sure how to help me, because I was just so consumed by this feeling of fear and doom, and I never thought that anyone could help me. Eventually I was sent to the GP, and then I was sent to the Maudsley, which is in Denmark Hill, and it is a medical centre, a children's medical centre, for for mental health disorders, but it's quite famous for treating eating disorders, and I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. And that was quite a shock for me, because I kind of denied that I was struggling with food. I thought it was a good thing that I was doing. And I continued to deny it for a very, very, very long time. I remember Christmas was really difficult, because obviously I was diagnosed in around October, and then before I knew it, there was Christmas, and that Christmas meal, I remember, was very, very difficult, because I just almost refused to eat anything, even the potatoes. I remember talking to my granny and almost shouting at her, which I can't believe I did this. I was literally almost shouting at her not to put goose fat on the potatoes, because obviously it was an animal product and those geese were killed to do that, and she promised that she wouldn't, and then I ended up walking in the kitchen and I saw her doing that, and I think that's the one and only time I've ever shouted or screamed at her, and I just had a complete meltdown, and it was horrible, because Christmas is supposed to be a happy time, but that really just ruined it for me. And I was just so obsessed, and I thought I was doing the right thing by refusing to eat anything, and I thought everyone else was wrong. And when I would go to the clinics, I had to understand that what I was doing was not helping anyone, was not helping myself, was not making any real change. And that took me quite a few months, or I'd say about 8 months of being under the care of the Maudsley, to finally understand that I wasn't changing anything by refusing to eat anything. So anything that had palm oil in it, or plastic packaging, or I'm vegetarian, so any meat or animal products, I would just refuse to eat it. But now I realised that was not the way to go about it. I'm still vegetarian, but I do not let that stress kind of stop me from being proactive. And at some point, I think I'd gone to about 2 or 3 climate protests at that point, and it was in Parliament Square, and these were their Fridays for Future strikes, so I'd skip a day of school on Friday, and I would go into central London, and I would have my little my banner or my placard or something, and we would march around past the Home Office and the Department for Education. And I keep seeing this group of people who are kind of leading the marches. And so I went up to them once and I just started talking to them. And it turns out they were from a group called Teach the Future. And that was it. I just started talking to them, and I just felt so comfortable with them, because they were so like-minded that they really understood me. And so I opened up about kind of what I was struggling with. Because at that point I kind of started to realise, okay, maybe it is an actual problem that I need to face. And I just opened up to them, and not everyone had experience an eating disorder induced by eco-anxiety, but many people had experienced, at least to some extent, eco-anxiety. And so I was so happy that finally I'd found someone or people who could recognize that they had suffered with that and they could help me. And they said, why don't you join us? We can help you focus your worries onto real action. And they kind of explained what they did. So Teach the Future, they talk to politicians about implementing climate policies in the education sector. So real, relevant and appropriate climate education in every single subject, because the climate crisis will affect every single person. And it didn't take my mind off of the food, but it definitely helped me to channel my obsession in a way, because all I would think about all day was food. If anyone who has had an eating disorder in general, doesn't have to be eco-anxiety induced, anyone seeing this and listening to this will understand that almost all you think about is food. And for once, I found that I had another purpose. I understood that I had another reason to try and get better. And so I focused everything on that. And obviously it took time. Change doesn't happen overnight, and I do still struggle with it sometimes now. But I have built up my resilience, and I have a reason to work hard to stay healthy, so that I can keep kind of pursuing what I believe in, which is a fair planet for everyone.
I think it's important also to see this in the wider context of change. We have nearly 8 billion people on the planet, and they're tech enhanced. So we've stepped on the accelerator of the pace of change and smashed it into the floor. And so they find out about things, anything that troubles them. The reflex is to Google or some other search engine and find out more about it. And we need to bear that in mind. And of course that gets reinforced because their friends are doing exactly the same thing and finding out the same results. And if I set that in perspective for you, about 20 years ago, I was doing an interview for a television program that was being made with Al Gore, who had just stopped being Vice President of the United States. And a film was being made by a friend of mine, somebody I knew very well. And when we finished doing the interview and I'd made the kind of points we set the interview up to do, he said, "Is it really as bad as you are saying?" And I said, and this is 20 years ago, I said, if we fail to solve this problem, you don't want to be under 40. And I would say that in spades now, and I'm well over 40. And so I have a very strong sense for a very long time of just how damaging this is to young people and to their prospects, and therefore to how they feel about their future. And I think it's quite interesting to think about this in terms of the dialogue, or the conversation, a better way of putting it, between children and their parents. When I was spending a lot of my time, as it were, talking to middle management in the corporate sector and trying to get them to understand something about the environment, what I discovered was that the single most influential group of people, at least in management terms, were 12-year-old girls, because they really had a big influence on their fathers and what their fathers were at least willing to talk about. And so one shouldn't see this as a one-way anxiety that somehow children have it and their parents don't. I think it creates a conversation that's actually enormously important in moving things on.
So what would you say are, the age that you are now, looking to your future, looking to the years that are to come and things, what would you say are your main concerns?
My main concerns are, well, it used to be that people would not understand that climate change and all of the socio-economic consequences of it are real. I think most people understand that climate change is real, but I'm concerned about how seriously institutional leaders and the general public alike will actually, how seriously they will understand that we need to change our lifestyles.
And I think we're at a period where wherever you look around the world, we don't have political leaders who are stepping up to the challenge of coming up with narratives that explain to people in a way that's credible, plausible, believable, what the world they're living in is like and what needs to be done about it.
How do you anticipate that impact and the change that you had impacting the rest of your life?
A lot of Western leaders are presenting these not empty words. They have some small promises, but they don't it's not enough in a way. And I know that's kind of big for me to say as a 16-year-old student who hasn't lived very long and doesn't understand these global issues as well as these global leaders. But I think they need to listen to those who are suffering the most, because I am not suffering the most, but indigenous groups and groups in the Arctic and the Amazon whose cultures and lives and homes are being destroyed directly or indirectly through the climate crisis.
I think at the end of the day, people, for the most part, are decent. They expect and want life to be decent, and they want to be decent with other people. And if I didn't really believe that, I probably would have given up trying to do what I'm doing a long time ago. The real point is to find the way to connect to other people, and when they're not listening to you, the first question you ask is, what are you doing wrong?
For families who are going through a similar situation with any age family member really who's suffered that, the same as you, eco anxiety, what kind of advice would you offer those families?
Listen to the person who is suffering in that way, and try to listen and explore what they're saying, because I think there's always underlying messages to how we communicate, because I was very blunt. I didn't like to express myself when I was kind of in the depths of my eating disorder. I wouldn't say very much. So my family kind of had to unpick what I was saying and try to read my emotions, my body language, as well as just what I was saying. So I think don't try to guess what they're saying, but try to listen to them and try to just support them in any way. Just try and be positive without lying. So I think there's a very fine line between optimism and naivety. I think you need to be honest, but you need to also be there to help them see that there is hope. I'm hoping that anyone listening, even if you are a political leader, if you are just a normal person, I hope you can hear my story. You don't have to have experienced the same thing as me, but if you can understand the emotions in a way of the guilt or the feeling of helplessness, then I hope you can understand that there is a lot you can do, and just find others who are like-minded. You just search up youth activist groups near me or climate activist groups near me, or what can I do to help, and just talk to your friends. And it doesn't have to be massive. Not everyone has to be a climate activist, but everybody has to do something, because it is everyone's problem, but everyone is also the solution.
Hello, my name is Paddy and I'm from Sydney, Australia. When it comes to climate change, I am extremely concerned and very worried about it. It takes up a lot of my day, whether it be thinking about it through volunteer work that I do or through working at an electric vehicle hire company. Climate really does encompass most of my days, most days. And it can be super overwhelming and lonely sometimes, especially people my age. I think they tend to be worried about it, but aren't so much dedicated to doing anything at all about it, which frustrates me, but I also understand that sometimes an issue is just too big to tackle and people feel helpless. But one way that I have found that I feel a lot better about climate and feel less anxious about the environment is by getting active and taking small steps as well as big steps, whether it be, bringing my Keep Cup to work or, going to a protest about climate inaction. It all really helps to meet people who are feeling the same way, as well as feel like you can do something, and everyone can do something. It's not like we're hopeless in this. We are driving the change and our vote counts. So yeah.
There are renewable and sustainable energy sources out there, and yet the government continues not to do anything. With gas prices going up, I think that now is as good a time as ever to introduce these alternatives, but it's seen that disaster is coming and not disaster is now. I'm concerned that the next generations, my children and grandchildren, will inherit a world without wildlife and nature, that there will be more forest fires and less forests, and more floods and less clean water. I'm concerned that they're never going to know playing fields and birdsong and blackberry picking and daisy chains, and that the gifts of nature will continue to be taken for granted by our generation so that there's nothing left for the next one. I'm concerned that mindsets are never going to change. There are still some people who can't swap out plastic straws for paper ones or turn a light off when they leave the room. It's seen as a far distant future that's never going to affect them, but we already are seeing the effects. I want to be able to play in the snow again. I haven't made a proper snowman in years, and I want to be able to read the news without hearing about another natural disaster that global warming has caused. I think that the world can do better, the government can do better, and everyone can do better, but we just choose not to. And that's why I'm so frightened about what the future holds.
My name is Holly Fawkes, and this is my 2-minute video about my environmental concerns. Every day I grow more concerned about the ongoing fuel crisis and skyrocketing prices, and realise there is no clear alternative to diesel and petrol except maybe hydrogen cars. They have a 200-mile range lead over electric cars and can be refilled in a matter of minutes, unlike a Tesla, which can take anywhere from half an hour to 12 hours to fully charge, depending on the charger. So how could anybody call that a clear alternative to fossil fuels when you would have to build in however many hours into your journey just to charge your car if you couldn't make it there on one battery? In 2022, the average cost of an electric car is £44,000. So how could I ever dream of affording that without putting myself into crippling debt? In short, fuel prices are going steadily up. They have no signs of coming back down anytime soon. We will never go back to where they were before the crisis. And we currently have a government that would rather have Christmas parties, COVID rules be damned, that refuses to address the issue and doesn't care about the people, and there is no clear alternative energy source. Thank you for listening to me.
Hi, my name is Lily. I am a 16-year-old in Dallas, Texas, and I go to an arts magnet school. I'm very passionate about my theater work, but I'm also very passionate about solving climate change. Many things that I do for climate change are driven out of fear that no one else is doing anything, so it's my responsibility that the stress and the pressure must fall on me, and it's something that I wish I didn't have to experience. And you wish you could just get past it, but when you watch it on social media and it's constantly fed to you and you're researching, and it's very stressful and it's very scary to have to look towards the future and plan for the future that might not be there. That the nature that I'm living in and the animals that I see might not exist in 10 years. And that many of our legislators won't be there whenever the most dangerous and irreversible effects of climate change really affect our generation. I believe that I can make an impact through urban and environmental design and reworking what we already have in our society and our infrastructure to benefit the planet. And I really hope that this film and the other people and contributing to this film can really make a difference, because I just want everything to be okay and the best for me and my children. Thank you.